Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Bible Illustrated Hands. Today's question comes from Holy Khan. His question is, Boyan, what is the church community like in Serbia? Here in America, most Catholics come to Mass on Sunday morning and then leave. I do go to a church where we do socialize after Mass and Vespers, but I get the feeling we should be evangelizing and helping the poor in some way in order to be a witness. How do Serbian churches witness to the gospel publicly? Part of me very strongly wants to go over to Georgia or Armenia or some other Eastern European country just to get an idea what Christian culture is actually like. Thank you for your question, Holy Khan. I will segmentize this question in a couple of parts. The first part will be the general view of the church, of the Serbian Orthodox Church in Serbia. The second part is what is the church community actually like, and third is how do we witness the gospel. So the first question is, how do people generally see Serbian Orthodoxy and the Serbian Orthodox Church in general? For ages, since I am aware, the church is always on the first place of institutions that are trusted by the Serbs. Serbs in general love their church a lot. This has multiple reasons to it, but the Serbian Orthodox Church did play a huge role in shaping these people, in preserving its identity, and even when we were left without a state, it was actually the church that upheld that very identity. So there's that. Serbs in general don't fast a whole lot. Generally, they will fast only on Friday, Great Friday and Christmas Eve. Maybe some important feast day like the elevation of the Precious Cross. And maybe if they're a tad more pious and they want to have communion, they might fast the first and the last week of the Great Lent and the Advent fast. There are people, of course, who fast all of the fasts, but these people are generally seen as, going too far. And this is especially true if you go to the liturgy, I don't think that this is true as it once was. But again, generally people find going to church on a regular basis sort of strange, in the sense of like, why do you do it? What's the point, But then this is due to church attendance being very much discouraged by previous communist authorities. Communists here didn't persecute church as they did in the Soviet Union, for example. But any public expression of religion was very discouraged, and we see the fruits of that today. People not attending the church is even a less of an issue. The bigger issue is the witnessing, and I'll get to that part later. Of course, there are people who oppose the church. These would be what you guys in the West would call liberals or leftists and so on. Even though they're primarily liberals, Do you remember that happy time when gay marriage was the sole thing you would argue, not identity politics? Where are those days? Yeah. So we are still lagging behind that trend, and thank God for it, because it is a much better trend to be arguing over than identity politics. And I'm really not a fan of that coming here eventually. So what is, of course, and there were some major scandals in the Serbian Orthodox Church. I won't go into them, but the church really did not act in a proper way. I sometimes see people say like, oh, we don't have the scandals like they do in the Catholic Church. We do. We do. Except that you see that from the Orthodox perspective in a country that actually persecutes, the wrongdoers. Here simply nothing happens. There's a scandal and it remains like that. And even if a court procedure is initiated, it simply is in a state of perpetual standstill, you know. So when I see young, zealous Orthodox Americans dreaming about the blessed Byzantium and church symphony, oh no, it's bad. I think that the best approach that the church should have with the state is that the state should simply leave the church be, and that's it. The less communication there is between the two, the better. Because what will happen otherwise is that the upmost echelon of the church would merge with the state. That is all I'm going to say. I could say more, but we have to be really good friends for that. So, what is the church community actually like? I will give you a brief primer of what it's like to attend a service in a Serbian church. And I would say that this is pretty typical of many other churches, maybe not even Orthodox ones. Serbs can be tardy when it comes to coming to services. I have seen it often. Like the liturgy begins and there are barely any lay people in the church, and by the time the liturgy ends, it is packed like this. There's not even enough room. Usually at the entrance of every Serbian church there is a small shop where you can get icons, incense, candles, and so on. And huge majority of Serbs, the first thing that they would do when they get inside of the church, they would light a candle for their living relatives and their departed relatives and friends. And it is a Serbian custom that that for the living people, because we have two candle stands. One is higher, one is lower, and for the living you light candles on the top stand, and for the departed you light it on the lower stand. There is some opposition to this in the sense that all the people are alive in the Lord, and this is simply a curious Serbian custom, you know. So in some churches they might have a single stand. I personally light them all up because I don't like that bowing motion that I have to do to actually reach some place to light a candle. I'm lazy. So, you know, the liturgy would begin, and again, as regards to laity, there's all sorts of people. There are people who simply stand. They might make a sign of the cross at the consecration, might. Then there are people who make like these bows at every mention of the Trinity, saint, noun, vowel, interpunction, or whatever, you know, and they're constantly on the move. Again, priests come in different shades and colors. There are pious ones, there are disinterested ones, there are problematic ones. Again, I'm not getting into those. The typical Serbian perception of a priest is a person who is very well-to-do and charges a lot of money for services like baptisms, weddings. That is something you do in Serbia. You actually pay for these services generally, and it's not called payment, but it is payment. And you can tell people as much as you want that they don't have to pay. They will feel extreme amount of pressure to pay and to gossip afterwards, and during and before. Again, this is something that is related to witnessing of the gospel, which I will touch upon later. And yeah, that priests are generally in there only for the money, that they eat pork on Great Friday, and everybody's great-grandmother has seen a priest in their village eat a pork chop during the Great Friday. Even my grandmother has seen this, or her mother, but this is one of those communist gossips that goes around. Of course, there are priests who probably do something like that, but you know, so what? I'm not fasting because of them. I'm fasting because of Christ. So, after the service in a Serbian Orthodox church, generally a liturgy, because other services aren't as well attended. There is usually a coffee hour, but the issue here is that it is generally not open to the public, in the sense that people who come to church often, they would have made some contacts, and then these people would go with the clergy into the local parish hall, and they would have like coffee, maybe some rakia, that is Serbian hard liquor, maybe some cookies, cakes, or whatever. But the thing is, these buildings usually aren't that large, and they cannot accommodate a whole lot of people. So if you are a newcomer, you will feel left out. In fact, when I started attending the church in 2003, up to 2007 or 8, I had basically no friends in my local parish church, because I didn't know anyone. I was anxious as just about any teenager. I didn't want to impose people, to ask them or something. So I did have friends, because thanks to the internet, and thanks be to God, this was the time of forums. So we still did not have that reputation of toxicity that follows the Orthodox people online these days. So I did have Orthodox friends, and sometimes I would go to their church, but as for my church, it was a no-go, and this is a common problem. So when I started attending the chapel that I'm attending currently, I suggested to the priest, but they also had the same idea before I suggested it, that after every liturgy we should invite everyone to stay afterwards, have a talk, and so on. And I think this has done a tremendous good for the community, because we started to actually connect. You know, we weren't simply some faces, you know, because usually there are two types of people in the church, essentially. People who know other people, and they stand and they form a community, and then there are those free satellites and free radicals that simply go around and so on. So as far as what people talk about after the liturgy, it can be anything. It can be religion, politics, everyday stuff as regards to religion. Again, what did the bishop do now? Or, oh, this was a terrific pilgrimage. Oh, I went to this pilgrimage, and this is my experience, and so on. These are generally very, very neat talks, you know. Again, generally, priests don't preach, as it were, during these. They, of course, people will give them their due honor. But conversation goes around, and we had this terrific priest, and he really tried his hard not to be the one who dominates the whole community, and he would actively try to engage everyone in a conversation. So if he would see somebody who's new, he would actually try to get that person somehow involved in the community, as in like ask him or her, hey, what is your name, or oh, it's nice that you came, and so on. And these things work magic. As I said before, other services aren't really that popular. A typical Serbian parish church will have 4 services. It would have matins in the morning, vespers in the evening, an Acatis service to the patron saint of the church, or the feast that the church is dedicated to, somewhere in the week after Vespers or instead of Vespers, and it would have the Divine Liturgy on sometimes, depending on the church, every Saturday, always on Sunday, and on every feast day. Then there is when it is the patron saint of the church, or Slava as we call it, usually the bishop would come, or auxiliary bishop, or the bishop's representative. I forgot the English term for that rank. That is a priest who is in charge of keeping the diocese in order to help out the bishop. And these are especially festive because you know, the liturgy will be extra solemn. Generally, we try to keep the liturgies and services solemn, but these are some special endeavors with complicated floral arrangements. The entire choir will try to come. By the way, choirs are very popular in Serbia, and the best way to actually integrate yourself in a church community is actually to join a choir, which is a no-go for me because I can't sing to save my life. And usually when there is a Slava or a patron saint day, there will be some lunch prepared for the bishop and his entourage and the local clergy. And there will be usually a secondary table, so to speak, for everyone who attends the Slava. And this has a curious moment of people who go from Slava to Slava. Okay, so these people aren't members of the local community, but they check their calendars and they know which church has its next Slava, and they go from Slava to Slava to eat a lot of food. And I mean, if they're poor, that's fine, but if you're not poor, maybe not the best practice. That would be about it. Maybe I probably forgot a lot of stuff. Orthodox people can arrange, you know, from again, from all sides of the political spectrum, because Serbs can get very divisive when it comes to politics. But the fact of the matter is, the political stances of our politicians are not all that much different, you know, which is something that is glaringly different from the American politics. So you can have people from all sorts of all sorts and walks of life, people who are very zealous, people who are very lukewarm, weird artsy types, strict zealous types, and so on. But we are all going through this together. Serbian grannies are also an interesting phenomenon, because generally, again, in online Orthodox Western world, grannies are sort of perceived like strict but upkeeping Orthodoxy. And now upkeeping Orthodoxy is, of course, a given for an Orthodox granny. But I always had the feeling that Serbian grannies are very kind, you know, unlike, for example, Greek yayas who might, you know, poke you with a knitting pin if you are standing in her way. So Serbian grannies are like, you know, very kind. They bake their pies or whatnots and bring it after the liturgy, and it's all sorts of wonderful. So that is how a typical church would look like. As for okay, I have just noticed that I did not connect the microphone, so this is pointless, and the sound quality will be off. So I apologize, and I'm sorry, especially because this is such a nice video. But oh well. So the final part is what does the Serbian Orthodox Church do to witness the gospel? This is sort of difficult to actually say for a number of reasons, because you know, we have that commandment from Christ not to brag about our good deeds. That's one aspect. So I believe that in the end we cannot know all the ways both Christians individually and parish communities and church at large, what all of the good that it does. We simply cannot know that. However, we have a special problem in the Serbian Orthodox Church because, again, due to communism and the church basically being restricted to the churchyard, that, again, it is both popular perception of both priests and laity, but thankfully it is growing weaker over time, that the clergy should only limit themselves to blessing things and doing services. So until very recently, we basically didn't have any church-run institutions, as in kindergartens or high schools. I still don't think that we have a hospital or some sort of a health institution. But yeah, we actually had, in Belgrade, we organized a first soup kitchen, church-run soup kitchen, some 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, but still it's quite bad. And there was this article of this journalist of a popular daily newspaper, and he dressed himself as a beggar, and he went around to, I believe, a mosque, 2 Orthodox churches, Serbian Orthodox churches, and 2 Catholic churches, if I recall correctly. And he was simply pushed out of the mosque. In one of the Catholic churches, they told him, they gave him some Easter eggs to eat because it was Catholic Easter at the time. In one Catholic church and in one Orthodox church, they said, no, sorry, we can't help you, we can simply give out money to beggars. But in one Orthodox church, the person who was selling candles actually took him to that church-run soup kitchen where he had a proper meal. So we had some good publicity out of it. What can we do better? Again, this is a very difficult thing to do because I'm no clairvoyant. In the end, I do not know how much how much money the church has, how much it can actually dispose of. The needs of the Serbian people are great, and again, we do have many church organizations who do different sorts of things. I actually was a founding member of one of them, but it fell apart because the obligations of every member started to grow and we got no new members, so it simply died out. Rest in peace, the fund of Saint Basil the Great. But I don't know. It is difficult. It is one of those things that, how should I put it? It is difficult to help needy people. I hate to put it like that. But because the easy thing would be to give them money, but that raises a whole set of issues. The most glaring one being that money being misappropriated for different stimulants and substances, which again we also use. Maybe not like drugs, but I think it was C.S. Lewis. He gave money to a beggar, and his friend told him, but he will simply use it to buy himself a drink. And he said, well, I would have done that too, so why not him? And there's a lot of truth in that. Personally, I think that the best way, but this is again very difficult, that the best thing that we could do is some sort of repentance. And I'm not saying this like, oh, this is always true, we can always repent, but I think that the popular perception, which is justified often, of a priest who does it only for the money is a huge problem. I actually know people who literally went into a seminary simply because they knew that if they become a priest, there will be a lot of money in them. And I have a friend, and they were meeting up on Christmas Eve, and they wanted to go out and have a couple of drinks. And one of his friends, who was a reader, not me, I wasn't part of that clique, he was a reader, he simply went into the church, he took the money of the icon, and then he went and bought them drinks. And try doing missionary work once you see that, you know, it is next to impossible, because people will always, if you're a serious Christian, people will always see you as deceived or in it for some lucrative purposes. Um, I don't know what we could do better, but I would really like to dispel any illusion of holy levitating Serbs or Armenians or Georgians just because the country is predominantly Orthodox. That is a great thing, you know, because you have access to the holy mysteries of the church and everything, but it brings with it a lot of other temptations that you would not dreamed of popping up if you're in a country that is not predominantly Orthodox, but it tolerates Orthodox presence. So, in a sense, be careful what you wish for. I think, again, I don't know where majority of you guys are, but if you're in a predominantly non-Orthodox country that does not persecute Orthodox, by that I don't mean COVID measures, strict as they may be, and even if they're primarily aimed at religious institutions, I primarily mean real, not real, but more stronger persecution. Take joy that your ranks are primarily composed of people who take their faith seriously. Even if they may, in your opinion, do it the wrong way, at least they're doing, you know, they're doing their faith. This one sounds good. So, I apologize for that. But I have noticed how much pious the Catholics in Serbia are, but that is the same reason, because they're a smaller community that's not really accepted by the community at large. I mean, there isn't any like persecution or anything, but if you're a Catholic, you will get a raised eyebrow. I hope I answered your question. I know that this is a bit a long-winded answer. But yeah, Orthodoxy has done a lot of these things to, how should I put this? To subtly influence Serbian mind, but deep down we are very pagan, you know. I don't think that it will ever be removed. Again, as I said with the candles, the first thing a Serb does when he or she comes into a church is to light a candle. And a Croat once remarked, it is interesting that Croats say, I'll go to church and pray, while Serbs say, I will go to a church and light a candle, you know. A typical Serb will rarely, if ever, use the verb pray, you know. He or she will just light a candle, and while candles do have their place in Christianity, the way Serbs do it is very pagan, you know. I light candle for you and you do a favor for me, you know, which is bad. But again, it may be an introduction to better things, right? Just remember that the Magi follow the star to the creator of that star. So while it is far from ideal, it is still an entrance to the true dedicated life of Christ for many of us. Today is the feast of Holy Theophany in the Serbian Orthodox Church, because we're on the old calendar. Sadly, I couldn't attend because I had to work. No, actually, Theophany was yesterday. Today is the day of St. John the Baptist. I couldn't attend both days, but I hope you guys could, and if you can, share a prayer for me. And again, I apologize for horrible audio quality. Bye.